Welcome to today's live stream program with Streamable Learning and Museum of the Rockies. My name is Angie Weichert and I'll be your host for today's program. In just a minute, I'll introduce you to Amy Atwater. Amy and I both work at the Museum of the Rockies here in Bozeman, Montana, which you can see behind me here in my picture. Before we get started, let's talk about a couple important things to know about the platform that we're using, Zoom. You have two ways to interact with us today, the chat box and the Q&A area. Amy may ask you a question, and if you have an answer for her, go ahead and type it into the chat box, and I'll read as many of your responses as I can. If you've got a question that you'd like to ask Amy, go ahead and use the Q&A area for that question. Sometimes our chat box moves so fast, it's hard to keep up with and keep track of those questions. So throughout the presentation, and more so at the end, I'll ask Amy as many of your questions as I can. Our program today will last about 45 minutes. And with that, I'm going to hide my screen. You'll hear my voice throughout today's presentation, giving Amy your responses and asking your questions. But please help me welcome Amy Atwater from Museum of the Rockies for today's presentation on primate evolution. Hey, Amy.
Hey, Angie. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for joining me today and joining us on our Fossil Friday live stream event this week on primate evolution. As you heard, I'm Amy Atwater. I am the Paleontology Collections Manager and Registrar here at Museum of the Rockies. Prior to my time as the Collections Manager here, I was a graduate student studying primate evolution at the University of Texas at Austin. It's there I studied really ancient primates that are about 50 million years old, and we'll talk about some of those. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. But first, to give you an idea of where we're located, Museum of the Rockies is here in Bozeman, Montana. We're a part of Montana State University. We zoom on in, you can see that we are south of the Canadian border and just barely north of Yellowstone National Park. So we have the closest airport to Yellowstone National Park, gateway to that beautiful place. When you come visit Museum of the Rockies, you will be greeted by Big Mike, which you've seen behind Angie today, and you'll see again when you visit the museum. So Big Mike is a bronze statue of a Tyrannosaurus rex fossil that was discovered in Montana. So that's a little bit about Museum of the Rockies, and that's about the only dinosaurs we're going to talk about today. So buckle up and let's talk about the cool mammals that are primates. So to start, what is a primate? All of these animals that you see here on your screen that are looking inquisitive are all primates. Primates are a group of mammals. So those are critters with hair and milk that are very unique as primates by a bunch of unique features that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to be talking first about the three main traits that we talk about in physical anthropology that unite all living primates and that we use to understand fossil primates as well. So first off, one of the most important things with defining a primate are our eyeballs. So primates have adaptations for improved vision. For mammals, we have put a lot of emphasis on our eyes, and we can see this not only through our large eye size, but also the regions of our brain that deal with vision are larger than other sensory sections of our brain, say like nose for olfaction. So what you can see here are a bunch of primates from lemurs, tarsiers, monkeys, and apes. And what you're looking at are big eyes that are staring directly back at you. That is because primates have forward-facing eyes. That is one of the defining characteristics of all primates are the forward-facing eyes. So here on the left, you can see a lemur that is staring directly at you with both of its eyes. You can make eye contact with both eyeballs there. And on the right, you can see a rabbit, which has lateral facing eyes, like a lot of prey animals do. So you can't necessarily look at a rabbit and see both of their eyes at one time. So this leads to my first question for everybody. What other animals, we know it's not a rabbit, but what other animals besides primates have forward-facing eyes like this lemur here? What do you think? Some look like they might have forward-facing eyes, but not all of them have true forward-facing eyes, like a few that I'm looking for in your responses. I'll give a couple seconds on that and continue on to this slide to show us what it looks like on the bony anatomy of a primate to have those forward-facing eyes. So A and B here are both skulls of primates, and you can see that they have a completely enclosed eye socket, and that is what we mean by forward-facing eyes. And I'm wondering what other animals have eyeballs like that?
All right, we've got quite a few guesses. We have, let's see if I can catch up with all of them. Marsupials, raccoons, panda, predator animals, tigers, snakes, owl, dogs, cats, lions, dogs, and humans.
Nice. Yes. Yes. And humans, we are primates. We're going to talk a lot about how we fit in this evolution of primates as well. Oh, those are some great answers. And I heard the exact ones I'm looking for, which are cats and owls. So cats and owls also have these physical features that you can see in this slide, which we call the presence of a post-orbital bar or a plate. So it means that you can actually form a complete eye socket, whereas C, the raccoon at the bottom of the screen, does not have a fully formed eye socket. That's because even though when you look at the picture of it, they look fairly forward facing, but when we look at the bony anatomy, we can see that that adaptation for increased support for the eyeball by the presence of a fully formed eye socket is not there. So cats also have this. Their post-orbital bars aren't necessarily touching all the time, but they do have a lot of emphasis on vision, and owls do as well. And some of the things that unite primates, cats, and owls happen to be that they are predators that use their hands and feet to grasp prey. So the important part about having forward-facing eyes is you have binocular vision, which allows you to have depth perception. So you have overlapping fields of view, which allow you, if you put your finger out in front of you and look at it, you can touch it without knowing exactly how far or close to your body it is, because your binocular vision helps that. Now, if you close one eye and you try to touch your finger, it's a lot harder because you don't have the binocular vision. And I might get it on an accident by trying a lot. So that's kind of an interesting test, how you can understand how binocular vision works for us and being able to grasp a delicious piece of fruit growing on a tree, like early primates would have been, and like a lot of primates do. Our next area that we're going to focus on after vision is classic hands and feet. Primates have hands and feet that are adapted to be very grasping and be well fitted for an arboreal or a tree lifestyle. So as we have as primates, we have these very tactile fingers, and we also have an opposable thumb, right? So primates have an opposable thumb that allows for better grasping, and most primates actually have an opposable big toe as well. So if you look at the image on the right, you can see the feet of this monkey are actually coming off at almost a 90-degree angle from the rest of the foot, and that's how most primates have their feet. We're strange because our big toe, instead of being out at a 90-degree angle, is actually in line with the rest of our toes to give us better support, because we walk around on 2 feet, which is very unique in the primate world and in the mammal world and in all animal worlds, really. So we have lost the foot grasping aspect, but humans do have adaptations for hand grasping as well. Another feature that we see with this is that primates, for the most part, have nails instead of claws. So we all have nails. Nails are flat and broad, and there is only one layer to the nail, whereas a claw, like your cat or dog, is much narrower, usually very curved, and also has multiple 2 layers in it, actually, that allow it to be functional. So there are some distinct differences between nails and claws, and primates, for the most part, there's a few exceptions in South America, have nails, which is thought to be, again, improving the tactile ability of our fingertips as we do so much learning about our natural world by touching things. But as we should all learn, right now is not a good time to be touching your face with our tactile hands. It's hard because it's literally in our ancestry. So an exception to this also are the lemurs. Lemurs have one digit on their hands that is called a grooming claw. This is an eye, which is arguably the most interesting looking primate. I always think it looks like it maybe stuck its finger in an electric socket or something like that. But they have one digit that is very, very, very elongated with a claw on it that they use for catching grubs and eating, as well as some grooming behaviors as well. So of course, there's going to always be exceptions to this, but for the most part, we do see nails in primates. And we use that for understanding if a fossil primate is truly a primate, but if it has all these claws, then perhaps it's not. So the last one I'm going to talk about for for how we define what a primate is, this one's harder to infer from the fossil record, but essentially what we see in all living primates today is an adaptation for extended life histories. Now what this means is essentially primates have done a really good job of expanding the different stages of life. So we have a very long juvenile period. We have a very long period as being babies too, where we need to be cared for by our parents or other members of our groups and communities. So we have really prolonged those different stages, which has led to a very long lifespan for most primates. And what it also means is that we can understand there's a difference between a primate. Let me pause on that one. We usually only have 1 to 2 offspring at a time. So that is a K-selective strategy, which animals may, instead of having lots of offspring all at once like a rabbit, that instead, which is an R-selective strategy, instead we are K-selective. We put a lot of energy into 1 offspring or maybe 2 offspring at a time. And that way we can give them this extended learning period for them to learn and be successful adults. One of the things I have left off on this list that you might be wondering about is brain size. I think I hear that a lot, is that all primates have big brains. And while that is very true for monkeys and apes, it doesn't necessarily hold true for lemurs and lorises. So we will talk about brain size as an adaptation for primates, but it does not necessarily ring true across the entire board. So that's why I left that one out. Okay, now we're going to transition to talking about the primate family tree. And it kind of is also going to serve as a framework for the rest of the talk too. So we're going to be discussing all of the primates here that you see bracketed by the red bar. We're going to be talking about lemurs, lorises, tarsiers, monkeys, and apes, and fossil members of these groups as well. That's our family tree. Now, our closest relatives as primates, our closest living relatives are these guys on the left side of the screen, which are called tree shrews and flying lemurs. So these are very close relatives of ours as primates, but they do not have forward-facing eyes. Part of their anatomy of their skull is different than ours, and a lot of them, and all of them still have claws instead of nails. They're very, very cool creatures though, and by studying them, we can learn a lot about the common ancestor we share with tree shrews and flying lemurs from a very, very long time ago. And flying lemurs are not actually true lemurs. They're also called colugos, and they're pretty adorable. You'll see the one sleeping there, and they can glide. They have skin between their limbs that allow them to glide through trees, and it's pretty adorable because they can make themselves into their own little hammock to take a nap, which is pretty cute. So those are our closest relatives to primates, but what we're going to really be focusing on today are true primates like this lemur here. This is a ringtail lemur. Lemurs today, we only find them in the island of Madagascar off the coast of Africa. We're going to talk about how monkeys get to places that are very far, monkeys and tarsiers and lemurs and all primates, how they actually can get to these places that are farther away. How did they get to Madagascar is a fascinating thought. We're also going to be talking about lorises. So lemurs and lorises are more of the primitive primates, if you will, in that we see some of their fossil ancestors showing up very, very, very early on, and they have anatomy that is more similar to these early primates than to monkeys and apes, and us for that. Tarsiers are arguably my favorite type of primate. Tarsiers have amazing big bug eyes. They live in Southeast Asia. They're very, very small. We're talking smaller than a house cat. And they really do look like they've just drank way too much coffee all the time. They have huge eyeballs. It's very, very fascinating. And they likely use this because they're a nighttime predator and they hunt invertebrates and things like lizards and stuff as well. So small vertebrates as well. Then we have monkeys. We're going to talk about monkeys and how we have monkeys in the old world and the new world, and talk about characteristics that define monkeys. And then we're going to talk about apes and the earliest apes, and then also humans and humans as apes and where we fit in with human evolution to this big picture of primate evolution. Okay, so we're diving into deep time here. The earliest primates appear in North America, at least, and are pretty much across the globe, right around 56 million years ago. So this is a stratigraphic column. It's been cartoonized to be easier to understand, but this essentially shows you the layers of rock that record the fossil record here on Earth and how we divide them up by time periods. So the red arrow is pointing to right about 56 million years ago, which is when primates appear in the world. Now, this is an interesting time period. This is the beginning of the Eocene time period. The Eocene is very, very, very warm on Earth. It's thought to have been an ice-free world at this time, so no ice caps at the poles. And there evidence that there would have been lush tropical rainforests all the way up to the Arctic Circle. In fact, we find early primate fossils up in the Arctic Circle. So it must have been warm enough in the Eocene to support primates and their relatively tropical lifestyle. So that's where we really see an adaptive radiation of primates, is right around 56 million years ago. And the ones we're going to focus on for today are these two. We have the Adapids and we also have Omamyids. So these primates show up around 56 million years ago and they go extinct around 40 million years ago. They're both very well known from North America, but there's quite a good fossil record of them in Asia and Europe as well. Adapids would have been slightly larger, so that's the one on the left side of the screen here. They would have had a longer snout, a little more like a dog, and they would have been slightly larger in size. And then Omamyids on the right, they're the apple of my eye. They're what I studied in graduate school, and they would have been smaller than Adapids and had a shorter snout, less of a snout, and arguably slightly larger eyes as well. So when it comes to how do these fossils relate to the ones we just talked about, well, here you go. So Adapids are most closely related to modern lemurs. Now, they are not a true lemur. They're very extinct, but they would have been a side branch, an extinct side branch off of the lemur family tree. And Omamyids are closely related to living tarsiers. But again, they're not actually tarsiers 56. They were not true tarsiers at 56 million years ago. They are just, again, a close relative of tarsiers that we have today. But they've evolved. Tarsiers alive today have evolved for millions of years. So they're not the same type of animal anymore, but they're closely related. So those are our lemurs and our tarsier relatives, or some of our earliest primates. And now we're going to jump into monkeys, unless I maybe had, if there were any questions, I can pause here too.
Sure, we've got a couple, Amy. Are there, let's see, let's do a couple. Are there any fossil lemurs found outside of Madagascar?
Yes. I mean, I guess it kind of depends on your definition of a true lemur. But yes, we find also fossil lemurs would have been much more widely distributed about, again, 56 million years ago. And at that time, Madagascar was already rifted from the rest of the coast of Africa. So we see the ancestral population that lived on the continent of Africa. We see fossil representatives of it there, and then we see them in the fossil record on Madagascar. So they must have lived on the continent of Africa, and somehow, probably because of, we'll talk about those processes in a minute, somehow they got over to Madagascar, and then the ones in Africa went extinct, but the ones on Madagascar were able to flourish and evolve and survive. So great question, fascinating topic.
And this one goes back to a couple slides ago. Do we know how big the flying lemur's brains are or were?
Oh, that is a great question. If you're wondering if it's relative to body size, it's nothing that is outside of the realm of pretty standard for mammals. So it's not like what we see monkeys and apes and us doing. And same with tree shrews. And what we also see in the brains of tree shrews and flying lemurs is a bigger emphasis on the olfactory system, the olfactory bulbs that sit right here at the front of the brain, and less of an emphasis on the visual aspects as well.
Great. I think we can keep rolling for now. We've got more questions, but we'll get to those towards the end.
Sounds good. And thank you all for the great questions. So now we're going to be talking about the earliest monkeys. There are a lot of these fossils, but for the sake of time, I've just chosen one to focus on, which is Egyptopithecus. This primate lived about 35 million years ago, and it's known from a very famous fossil site called the Fayum in Egypt, which is in northern Africa. So it's pretty amazing. If you look at the skull that's on the right, you can see that we're dealing with a slightly bigger animal than the Eocene primates, like the Adapids and Omomyids. And we're also seeing a deeper mandible. And another trait that you can see on the depiction here on the left is that Egyptopithecus would have had a long tail. And that might seem weird or funny as a defining characteristic, but really a quick and easy way to tell if it's a monkey or an ape is, does it have a tail or not? So monkeys do have long tails. It's thought to be a support for living in the trees and running around on the tops of trees and running around on the ground and keeping them balanced. So we also see in monkeys is what we call pronagrade posture, which goes hand in hand with having a narrow rib cage. This is also related to the shoulder. So essentially, monkeys walk around. Their locomotor behavior, if you will, is to be quadrupedal, which means they walk on all fours, and they have their shoulders on the sides of their narrow rib cage, not on their backs like we do. So I'm going to go to this picture to kind of go in depth on that. This is a baboon skeleton. And this goes into how you can see that the shoulder is actually placed on the side of the rib cage. And the rib cage is very narrow from side to side, but very deep from front to back. And so this essentially is what your cat and dog are going to look like as well. And it's essentially why your cat and dog can't give you a big hug. It's because their shoulder joints are on the sides of their bodies from being quadrupeds and being in this pronagrade posture. And so they don't have the ability to go outward with their arms and wouldn't be able to necessarily give you a big hug. What's also pretty ironic about all of this is that most monkeys would be very terrible at the monkey bars. They would probably run on top of the monkey bars. They wouldn't necessarily swing. Now, some monkeys are able to do the monkey swing look as well, but I find it pretty funny that most humans are much better at monkey bars than actually a monkey is. So it goes, misnomer. So one of my favorite topics, you could probably tell I'm very excited about primates in general. I think I've said that these are my favorite things to talk about multiple times, but I like them all. One of my favorite things to discuss for primate evolution is when monkeys split. So we used to only have monkeys in the old world and really just in Africa. So we now today have New World monkeys, which you can see on the left side of the screen here, and they live in South America. On the right side of the screen, you can see Old World monkeys, which live in Africa and Asia. So they ended up actually splitting about 40 million years ago. Now, how can we tell them apart? What are their characteristics? Well, they're very similar as they're very closely related, but New World monkeys, so the ones in South America, actually have an extra premolar. So if you take a look at the dental diagrams on your screen, New World monkeys have 2 incisors, 1 canine, 3 premolars, and 3 molars. Apes and Old World monkeys, including ourselves, have 2 incisors, 1 canine, only 2 premolars, and 3 molars. And if you're a human like me, you probably only have 2 because you got your wisdom teeth yanked out. So we're even more different from the New World monkeys. So the teeth are what we look at, and this is very exciting from a fossil record perspective. So we can tell a lot about evolution of different primate groups by looking at their teeth. And another characteristic that is unique in New World monkeys is seen in the upper left here, which is this monkey that is literally using its tail to drink water. So pretty sure this is a woolly monkey, and they have prehensile tails. So the New World monkeys have an adaptation to actually use their tail as a prehensile limb that helps them balance as they live in their forested environment in South America. Okay, so I'm getting back to this. How the heck did they get from Africa to South America 40 million years ago? This is what the plates would have looked like 40 million years ago. This is a paleogeographic reconstruction. So we know that Africa and South America would have been approximately 900 miles apart. So how did they get here or get to the New World? What are your guesses? We know they did because we have a fossil record that goes back to about 40 million years ago. So how did they get from Africa to the New World? What are some guesses out there? And for everyone else, admire these very unique looking primates. They're beautiful.
All right, we're starting to get a few guesses coming in. Go ahead and use that chat box to type in how you think these primates got from Africa to what's now South America. We've got a couple. I think you're kind of stumping them here. We've got that they wandered over, that they just went around.
Yep, land bridges. Good idea.
Yep. I guess of Pangea.
Okay. I see some
tectonics. The swimmer float over.
Nice. Well, that is tapping in. So we have not figured this out 100%. It's not like we have a fossil that is in the middle of the ocean per se. That would be very cool. But the best hypothesis right now is literally rafting primates, that they rafted over from Africa to South America and crossed 900 miles of open ocean, because there's no other explanation. And that, of course, brings to mind, if you're like me, something like this. This is what I picture happening 40 million years ago. I hope you enjoy it because I made it just for this presentation and it's utterly absurd. So this is what I think of when I hear of rafting primates. In reality, it would have been more of a vegetation raft, right? Not an actual, let's go raft some big water. So we have seen this happen before in the Caribbean, that a large in a big storm, a bunch of trees and debris can be put into the ocean by all that storm power. And a lot of times there's animals incorporated with that too. So iguanas have actually dispersed into new islands in the Caribbean because of these land rafts. And this is the best hypothesis for how primates got from Africa to South America. And there's new evidence with new publications that just recently came out that indicate they didn't do it just once. They did it at least 2 times, if not more. So rafts of monkeys made it across the ocean 40 million years ago and were able to populate the New World with monkeys. Pretty cool, pretty fascinating story. I think it would make a great Disney movie, but we'll see if they ever get there.
This is a great relevant question that I can interrupt you with here. Is did only one species raft over, or were there multiple founder species?
Oh, that is a great question. Now, it's hard to truly know, right? If they passed away and their bones were not fossilized, we didn't necessarily know. But the idea is that probably more than one species made it across. And we now know, based on, again, dentition, the teeth, that at least multiple different journeys probably happened as well. So it was probably multiple species, and it probably happened in multiple rafts. And the unfortunate thing I do have to point out here is that I always think of how many rafts full of monkeys didn't quite make it before one finally did. I doubt that the first raft was successful, and it is a fascinating topic to think about, animals migrating by these storm-driven vegetation rafts. Okay, we're gonna jump into apes now for our final part here. So this is, again, there's a lot of early apes that you can learn about in the fossil record. I'm going to focus on proconsul. It's very well known. It's found in Africa in rocks that are about 25 to 5 million years old. And what we see happening by the stage of proconsul getting to the scene is we're seeing these distinctive ape traits, which include the no tail, and having more of a flexible shoulder, and they have more of a broad barrel-shaped rib cage. So if you think about apes today, so like gorillas or chimps or orangutans or gibbons, or us for that matter too, we do not hang out in a quadrupedal position, and very rarely, and that's a lot of times because we are orthograde as apes. We have actually started to put our, instead of our spine being parallel to the ground, we have moved 90 degrees, and now our spine is perpendicular to the ground. And this has led to a broad barrel-shaped rib cage, and it has helped with the more flexible shoulders that allow apes to do the range of motion that we're so known for, including things like gibbons and orangutans, which are expert brachiators, and that means to brachiate is to swing through the branches, essentially. And it's because of a very flexible shoulder joint that allows apes to do that. So if you see a picture of a chimpanzee that's called a monkey, it is not a monkey, that is an ape, and there are important differences. And another important difference that we see at this stage too is an increase in brain size. We're starting to see this increase in encephalization, which is the fancy word to say your brain is getting bigger. So we're starting to see some of that, though compared to us, they still have relatively small brains. And that's what's going to lead us to our last bit here, guys, which is on human evolution. Not going to spend a ton of time on all this. You can take many classes and read many books just on the subject of human evolution. But here is a nice diagram, again, showing that primate family tree that we're a part of. It's more pretty than the one I showed you earlier. And on the right, you can see where humans, or hominins, our group, split from apes and chimpanzees about 7 million years ago. So we did not evolve from apes or chimpanzees. We didn't evolve from old world or new world monkeys. We evolved from this common ancestor. So 7 million years ago is when we last shared a common ancestor with chimpanzees, and now we have been evolving independently for 7 million years since then. So important characteristics that define humans outside of what we see in apes. We see a variety of traits. Of course, there are a lot more than what I have here, but I'm focusing on some of the big ones. So we see that humans are bipedal, which is really weird. other primates think we look so goofy. They really think they're like, what is up with those weird apes? Also, we have an increased brain size. So they're also looking at us going, why are their heads so bulbous and big? And what's also interesting is we have less prognathism. And we have bigger, nice big flat molars too. But the prognathism has to do with this part of your face, the snout where your nose and your mouth is. It doesn't stick out very far in humans like it does in chimpanzees or gorillas. And so we don't really have that snout. We have a very, honestly, it's a neoteny event. It's a feature that is very juvenile, really. We look like we have baby faces that never fully developed. So other primates and other animals are like, look at those weirdos with baby faces and bulbous heads walking around on two legs. I almost guarantee you, but I don't speak chimpanzee, so don't take my word for it. Another huge thing that defines humans, or at least is within this story, is tool use. I will say that other primates use tools as well. Chimpanzees have been documented to use tools in a variety of situations, but none to the way that humans do. And of course, then humans also have language and religion and other aspects as well that we're not going to focus on for this. That would be a different topic. So to focus briefly on, I'm going to show you two snapshots of some important species or genera. So the first one is going to be Australopithecus. This is Australopithecus afarensis in this slide. So Australopithecus lived about 2 to 4 million years ago. It lived in Africa, mostly East and Southern Africa. The most famous Australopithecus specimen known, and arguably maybe one of the most famous fossil specimens known to everyone outside of this in general, is the one on the far left. This is Lucy. It is a partial skeleton of Australopithecus afarensis that shows this beautiful mosaic of traits. We see derived human traits like bipedality. We can see from the hips of Lucy in the skull, or some parts of the skull, that Lucy would have been an obligate biped or lived and would have walked on 2 feet most of the time. However, there are a lot of features about Lucy that show still a lot in common with our last common ancestor with chimps, including a smaller brain size and a very broad chest. They would have been fairly small as well in the chimp size range. And another way we know they're bipedal is the image on the far right, which is kind of grainy, apologies. These are actual footprints that are 3.6 million years old. So must have been from the time of Australopithecus that show an Australopithecus sized animal walking bipedally on this volcanic ash that happened to fossilize. Pretty fantastic discovery. Very amazing. Jumping ahead into geologic time to one of our more recent predecessors. This is Homo erectus. So Homo erectus is now a true hominin within our human family lineage. They lived about 1.8 million to about 140,000 years ago. The map here goes to show you on the bottom of the screen that Homo erectus was the first human to leave Africa and disperse, at least widely disperse and successfully disperse to other parts of the world, which is pretty incredible. Looks-wise, they would have looked a lot more like modern humans than Australopithecus. They would have been about the same size. You can see the skeleton on the left. This is Turkana which has a lot of the same features and proportions. It does have an interesting, strange shoulder joint that is still unique to Homo erectus. We're seeing an increase in brain size, but it's still, again, not as big as what we see in Homo sapiens, our own species. And we see a very pronounced brow ridge, kind of like that classic Neanderthal look as well. And by this point, it is very well established that humans were, like Homo erectus, were in fact using complicated stone tools like the one in the bottom right of your screen. So that is Homo erectus is more than likely the direct evolved into us, but it also evolved into lots of different species of Homo as well. So this tree is what I prefer for a depiction of human evolution. human evolution would have been branching, and there would have been a lot of branches that did not evolve into a lineage that is alive today like us. There are a lot of dead ends in human evolution as we branched, and in primate evolution, as all of these animals branched out, some went extinct and some led to the modern species we see today. I will just say that I do have a pet peeve. I really do not like the depiction of evolution, of going like there's one animal that just turned to the next, that makes it seem like there is a linear progression to evolution, and that is not how evolution works. Evolution is all about being well adapted to your environment for that time, and that is why we see, again, branches as all of these different species adapted to their different environments. It was not a linear progression of one to the next. It is branching, and modern humans show up about 300,000 years ago. That's it. We've been talking about 56 million years of primate evolution, and we have only been around for the very slight, tiniest part of it, which I think is very fascinating and humbling as well. And I hope you have enjoyed learning about all of these different aspects of primate evolution and how humans fit into all of that. For some conclusions, again, I just want to give a shout out to the incredibly amazing fossil record of fossil primates that goes back more than 56 million years. We've learned about some major adaptations that we've seen in this group, including our eyes, our hands, our feet, our brains, and our long lifestyles. And I really want to emphasize to you that the process of evolution, more often than not, is going to lead to a branching pattern of relationships among these organisms. It is not, again, a linear progression. So thank you all for joining me. I would like to plug that we do these Fossil Friday live streams every Friday at this time. Next week, we're doing Time of the T-Rex. So please come back to check that out. And if you want to see older live streams and see even more online resources from Museum of the Rockies, be sure to go to museumoftherockies.org/learn. And thank you so much. Hopefully I'll have some time for questions.
Thank you very much, Amy. Unfortunately, we are out of time for today. We had so many great questions in the Q&A area. Thank you so much for being here. We continue to have these Fossil Friday programs because of our great paleo team. So thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much from Museum of the Rockies and Streamable Learning. Happy Fossil Friday.
Happy Fossil Friday. Thank you.